Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Tales Podcast here today, episode 101. Hello, we're here. I'm joined by John Cook. I'm going to now give the intro over to Jono, though, because this is the start of John Cook's kind of series, I suppose, on the show. It was his idea, and he's going to take you through what's going to be happening over, I suppose, the next 2 years of the show, really, is potentially.
Yeah, the name's Cook, John Cook. And we were wondering a little while ago what we would do when we finished with well, not exactly finished, but when we kind of run out of a backlog of MCU films to do, because obviously we'll still review new MCU films as they come in. But we were like, okay, we need another series to do. And here we are, as you may be able to see from my YouTube background or not, if you're listening to the podcast. We had a little discussion and we decided that we are going to, on a monthly basis, review the James Bond films in order. So this is effectively the first one. This is us here today reviewing Dr. No. How are we going to do this? We've got 25 films, so we're going to do one a month over the course of the next couple of years. It's not just going to be myself and Alex every time, although it is just us today. We're going to have a guest contributor coming in for each of the remaining films, doubling up now and then. So, some people are going to do 2 or 3. Sometimes it's going to be people that we've had on before. Once or twice, it's going to be new people that are coming in to give you a bit of variety and, spice things up a little bit. And we're just going to engage in James Bond, have a very great time. It's going to be a very interesting one because I've seen literally all of these films. I practically grew up with them. Some of these films I've seen like upwards of 20 times. Alex, on the other hand, has only seen the Daniel Craigs.
Yes.
So anything pre-2006, he is experiencing for the first time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exciting. I can't really wait. It's weird to think that we've got contingency plans for the next 2 years of podcasting. Sort of weird when you kind of commit to that. I suppose it's weird because even in the podcast infancy was when we started the MCU, because that was like episode 14, and that took us like episode 90 something. So really, it's weird to kind of start a new road again. I'm excited for it though.
If we do one a month, this will take us up to like episode 205.
I'll be 23.
And we might. I'm not going to say how old I'll be.
We might also know who the new James Bond or 007 would be at that point as well. So
that's Chris Marshall, isn't it?
It's always bloody Chris Marshall. But my bet's David Tennant because it's either Chris Marshall or it's David Tennant. So yeah,
it's always David Tennant. He's everywhere. He's absolutely
yes. But also, like you say, it's interesting for me because normally when we go into a podcast, it's either something that I've known before. So even if it's a new Doctor Who story, I know the world of Doctor Who. Whereas I know the world of the Daniel Craig Bonds, but I'm also very aware that they're sort of isolated in terms of they're very different. To say, for example, today's film, Doctor No, which is the much different to what Daniel Craig and the team did now. So it's kind of interesting to go back to that. Also do want to emphasize you're not going to miss any of the content. So like John said, there's some Marvel content. We're still doing Doctor Who monthly as well, and there'll be other things popping up around and stuff. So you're not missing out.
We'll be doing wrestling every now and then, all of that. This is just something that we're adding in because we kind of realized that obviously we've done the backlog of Marvel films, and now there's kind of space one a month for doing something else.
Exactly. Yeah. I also I know, John, you want to bring this up as well. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the podcast, we always hear about good vibes and having a laugh, which was shown on the 100th episode of the podcast, part 1. A very fun and fair podcast where did we take jabs at each other a little bit? Yes, absolutely. For our Doctor Who opinions, me and Reese especially got a few jokes thrown our way. However, there was a comment received in the comment section, which you cannot find because I did delete it. Maybe I shouldn't have, and maybe we should have had screenshots and what have you. But at the time, I was too appalled and a bit taken back by some of the language used. I won't repeat it here. It's on Twitter. I don't, I don't really want to, but it was taken into a place that wasn't fair on myself, John, or perhaps anybody else that it could have been potentially aimed at within the podcast. There was some offensive language, some offensive terms used, and it's not something I like. And like John said, before John goes into his bit, it was all centered around the fact that the battle around Scarif Kolos, the Doctor Who story, for those who aren't Doctor Who fans, was at the bottom of our all-time list of Doctor Who stories. And like John said in his tweet, I'm a defender of the Whittaker era. I'm a big fan. So why, even though you should never bring it to that level, why are you even coming at me in the first place? Is bizarre enough. And it just shows there are some people out there in the world that doesn't matter what you actually say, they just want to tear you down and they'll say anything to do it. You know, they don't really give a shit what you really think. They just want to try and say shit to bring you down. And yeah, it was horrible. But I'll let John say a few words. I know he wants to speak about this one.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I was absolutely raging when you told me about this the other night. I completely understand why you deleted the comment. I can appreciate why you did that. However, if the person who left that comment is listening, or anybody else who is considering leaving us abusive comments is listening, I have asked Alex in future not to delete any abusive comments that come in, because I want to be screenshotting them. I'm going to be calling them out publicly on Twitter. At the end of the day, we're here talking about a TV show. We're talking about different opinions on a television show. If you want to come and disagree with us about a television show, absolutely fine. Do not ever bring my disability, Alex's disability, any other irrelevant factor into that. Do not ever throw ableist abuse at us. It is immaterial. It is inconsequential. It's nothing to do with our opinions on a television show. You know, I don't think that the Battle of Ranskar Kolos is shit because I'm blind. I think it's shit because it's shit. And by coming at me with ableist abuse, do you really think that is going to change my mind? Do you really think that's going to sit? I'm going to sit there and go, oh, this person's called me blind and retarded, and suddenly I love this episode. No, all you're doing is convincing me even more that it's shit, because that is the only argument that you have. You don't have the capacity, logically or evidentially, to come at us and actually form an argument and explain to us why it's not the worst Doctor Who story that's ever been made. All you can do is get personal. That's the level of your mentality. That's all you've got. You're going to the last resort. And it is worth mentioning that it wasn't just bottom. It was bottom by some way. It was like a full 0.75 below the second worst story. And 9 people voted for that. So it wasn't even just about my opinion or Alex's opinion, which is incredibly fair when it comes to the Whittaker era. You know, it's down there because it's trash. It's down there because it's toilet. And I'm going to sit here and say that it's trash and toilet once again, because I know that pisses you off. I know that gets to you. I know that you're affected by me saying that this absolute anti-climax series finale that is a waste of 60 minutes of my time, a waste of a very good guest cast, a waste of any petrol that was used in filming it, a waste in any of the electricity, of time, of energy, even a waste of the fucking sandwiches that they had for lunch while they were making it. I'm just going to double down on that and double down again, because all that you've done by coming at me and coming at one of my best friends is show what a pathetic person that you are, and show that I can get to you by telling you that that story is god-awful, shite, deserves to be bottom of the pile, and will probably still be bottom of the pile in 50 years' time when they're celebrating the 110th anniversary of Doctor Who, because Russell T Davies is coming back, and he is 100 times the writer that your buddy Mr. Chibnall will ever be.
Clip that and put that on Twitter. Ah, that's great. No, absolutely. I also,
That's a sound bite for your podcast tweet, isn't it?
yes, absolutely. I also do have to say though, as well. Thank you to anybody that liked or retweeted tweets here that were, that were, we posted, and also anybody as well. Like I like John said at the very start of his discussion. If you guys want to disagree with us, we're fine with that. That's what this show is all about. The reason that there's 6 of us on the podcast is so there can be discussion, there can be disagreement. And I understand. I do want to. It's a substantial, loud minority that do this. I know. I have been to events and I've met some of the loveliest people ever. It is a loud minority. So don't worry, we do know and we do realize that it is a loud minority.
Oh, absolutely. This is somebody that is part of a minority. It's an absolute outlier. And I have to say that, some of the supportive messages that we've had on Twitter today, when I called it out, have come from fans of this era. They've come from Jodie fans who themselves are appalled at the way that we have been treated and the way that has been represented. It's not indicative of that part of the fandom as a whole, but I'm not going to have anybody, whatever their reason, treat us that way and treat you that way.
Absolutely not. And for those people who are very similar and say things like once, the doctor comes back and it's not a woman, or, as the doctor comes back and it's not this person. If you don't like the fact, if you say that you're all inclusive and then you don't like the fact that, Shooty Gat was another doctor or whatever, piss off. We don't want you here. If you're all inclusive or you're not, shut the fuck up. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Be, if fuck off. Seriously. Let us be. Let us enjoy Doctor Who. We weren't stopping you in the first place, so don't try and stop us. That's it.
I think I might draw the line if the Doctor was played by a Tory.
Jacob Rees-Mogg is the Doctor.
He fucking dresses like him half the
time. That's why I thought of him. Right, anyway, let's go back to the fun and games. Right, so we are starting with Dr. No here today. And like I said, like John said, I have never seen this film before this afternoon. First of all, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know the plot. I knew that Sean Connery was in it, and that's about it. I'll let John do obviously it's a film, so I'm not going to get him to do the entire breakdown, but he wants to give like a smaller sort of synopsis-ish thing, and then we can kind of get into the nitty-gritty. Because he can probably do a much better job than I can.
Yeah, I've seen it like 20 times, so I'm more than happy to do so. Okay, so obviously Dr. No, made in 1962, released on October the 5th, 1962, actually, so we're coming up to the 60th anniversary of Bond this year. The film opens after your standard Connery firing down a gun barrel opening and the kind of stylish Bond theme credits. We are in Jamaica, where Strangways, who is a British agent, he's playing cards with 3 of his buddies, one of whom is the head of Government House in Jamaica, and another one is Professor Dent, who's a geologist, and there's also an army major there. So Strangways goes off to his regular 4 o'clock, I think it's 4 o'clock. I mean, if I'm right, I'm a genius. Goes off to his regular 4 o'clock call. But on his way out of the building, he is assassinated by 3 men posing as blind men in what's one of the most iconic scenes in Bond history. So they kill Strangways, they dump his body into a car, they then drive off to his office, kill his secretary, trash the place, and steal 2 files from his filing cabinet, which are relating to Crab Key and Dr. No. So if no spoilers there, it's literally the name of the film. We then go to London, where James Bond is called away from his gentleman's club, where he's playing Baccarat. I think it's Baccarat he's playing. And goes to M's office, where it's explained to him that they've not heard anything from Strangway. He's not been able to reach him for hours. And he's told to fly straight out to Kingston to go and find out what's going on. So after going back to his hotel and having a bit of fun with a young lady, Bond flies out to Jamaica, where he is met by a driver claiming to be from Government House. However, Bond phones up Government House on the sly and finds out the driver is not actually from there. he's taken away and watched out of the airport by a very shady man in shades, actually, sunglasses. So Bond asks the driver to take him to the government house, but take him on a little tour first. They go down a side road where Bond confronts the man by sticking a gun in the back of his neck. There's a fight and he overpowers him, but just before the man tells him who he works for, he bites into a cyanide cigarette. Somebody has terrified him so much that he's committed suicide with cyanide. Bond then goes to Government House, where he finds out that Strangways has been working with a local fisherman called Quarrel. He goes down to the docks, where he meets Quarrel, who I love as a character, actually. And they then go and meet in a sort of restaurant bar where Quarrel and his friend, the name of whom I cannot remember, but I'll look it up later, attempt to fight with Bond in the back room. Bond overpowers the pair of them, but then our friend with the sunglasses approaches from behind and puts a gun to Bond's neck. It turns out that actually this is Felix Leiter, a CIA agent who Bond is meant to be working with, and that Quarrel and his friend have been working with Leiter in order to find out what's going on, because somebody has been using a radio transmitter in order to try to divert rockets and missiles being sent from Cape Canaveral. And obviously the US are very, very interested in that. On speaking to Quarrel about Strangways, it turns out that Strangways has been taken to a place called Crab Key, which Quarrel is very, very suspicious about. They went there at night, collected some rock samples. Bond ascertains that Strangways took the rock samples to Professor Dent, and Professor Dent, the geologist, basically says, well, they were just rocks and he wanted to find out if they were worth any money. However, it turns out that Dent is actually an agent working for the mysterious man who lives on the island, a man called Dr. No, and Dr. No gives Dent a tarantula, which is placed in Bond's bed. We then get an incredibly tense scene, which again is quite iconic, of Bond in bed with the tarantula slowly kind of crawling up him and crawling over his face. It feels like it lasts about 5 minutes, but it doesn't. He kills the tarantula and then realizes that Dent is a baddie, a double agent. The next day he goes to Government House, ends up chatting up the head of Government House's secretary, and goes to visit her. She is also working for Dr. No. After spending the afternoon with her in a biblical fashion, shall we say, Bond pretends that he's going to go to a restaurant, but actually telephones for the chief of police to take her away. He waits in the room when Dent comes to kill him, because Bond set the pillows up to look like a body in the bed, and he confronts Dent and then kills Dent. Bond and Quarrel then take a trip over to Crab Key on Quarrel's boat. When there, they meet a shell catcher named Honey Rider, played by Ursula Andress, who is rather undressed in this particular film at various points. And they're hunted down on the island by various kind of soldiers and militia who are working for Dr. No. It's quite clear early on that the island is radioactive. They're getting Geiger readings from everything. Quarrel's continually talking about dragons, and Honey Rider backs him up that there are dragons. They're hunted with machine guns, they're hunted with dogs. Finally, a tank with a flamethrower attached comes after them, and Quarrel is killed quite horrifically. He's burnt to death. Bond and Honey are then taken to Dr. No's base, where initially they're treated relatively well, but they're then drugged. Dr. No is a man with kind of amputated hands. He's got like metal hands, which I think they establish has happened as a part of like the atomic experiments he's doing, because he's got a nuclear reactor on the island that he's using to power his radio waves. Bond eventually overpowers one of the scientists and then decides to send the nuclear reactor into kind of overdrive to lead it to explode by just turning up the heat and then throwing a couple of people into the water coot that's cooling the reactor. Dr. No attempts to kill him, but there's quite a good fight on like a platform and a ladder, which results in Dr. No dying in the reactor because his metal hands can't grip on the ladder. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time in the Bond series that we will see somebody's disability be used against them. And it's not the first time that we're going to see disabled supervillains. It's a bit of a running theme. But yeah, so in the end, the island is evacuated. Bond rescues Honey, who's been kind of chained up to the bottom of a kind of creek.
of something. She's just there.
Yeah, it's like a kind of cave. She's kind of chained up in a cave.
She's sort of like tied up in a cave in very shallow water, just covering the bottom of her legs for some reason.
Yeah, it's like I'm not. What are you? What you've got a nuclear reactor going off, and what you're waiting for the fucking tide to come in. It's not like any sharks are going to reach you there, and I'm not aware of any crocodiles or anything like that. But yeah, for apropos of no reason at all, she's literally chained up to the bottom, tied up to the bottom of a cave with some very shallow water. Basically, I think Dr. No just goes, "I'm going to leave you here to look sexy," and so he rescues her. They escape from the island, get onto a boat, and are then towed away by Felix Leiter and the CIA, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I think I've got most of the salient points in there. I don't think there's much that I missed.
No, not at all. I think you hit the nail on the head. Right, John, I'm going to go first this one. I had a good time with this. I can't lie. I had a good time. Obviously, it has its issues. Some things are dated. I don't just mean like obviously the effects and stuff. Like I mean some of the subtext and some particular people are not represented very well, shall we say. However, there's a few things that stood out to me within 10 minutes. First of all, Sean Connery is like so charismatic instantly. He's amazing from the first scene, just has so much, pizzazz, I suppose. It's very good instantly. Number two, actually, I thought the action in this wasn't that bad. Obviously, 60s films, so you have to take into consideration that you can't have all the big bang, crash, and wallop that we do in the Bond films these days. But actually, there was, like you say, there's a few really good scenes. I thought actually the suspense in this movie was really good. There was a real, especially in the middle act, there's a real sort of, you don't know who you can trust. So every character you sort of meet and you initially think they're good, you don't know, and that's very well handled, and you kind of don't know who you can trust. So you're sort of analyzing every person as you're watching it to kind of go, oh, are they bad? Are they not? The before it's really funny. I don't know if it's intentionally funny, but it's like obviously they want Bond to be a womanizer, so essentially he says two things to them, and they already want to just sleep with him. Like the first time he sleeps with her, I don't know what her name is. That's how much
Sylvia Trench, isn't it?
Yeah,
like I mean, to be fair, he I think he does like literally lend her £1,000 across a card table or something. So
yeah,
that's probably got him in her good books to start with.
Yeah, and then she's just in his room, and he's like, "I've got to go." She's like, "But do you have to go?" And they make love. Then Bond knows that this woman is bad, but still decides to, And then at the end, they're being towed along by this other boat, but they're like, he's just like, nah, screw it. I want to make out with this girl even more and have sex. So I'm just gonna leave the tow. Because I want. So yes, that's really.
Yeah. It's like you've been towed for 3 minutes. There's literally a bloody nuclear reactor going off behind you, and you're just gonna, you can't get like a tarp or something and pull it over you. You're literally gonna leave the boat that's towing you away.
It's brilliant. I think, and also another thing that's really good about this film is the pacing. It moves at a whip. It's not slow at all. Within 10 minutes, you're already into the action. Bond's already in Jamaica. You know what's going on. It's already kicking off. It's a lot of fun, this one. It's a lot of fun, I'd say.
Yeah, it's almost made as if like film is at a premium, and so they're like, right, we're not going to waste any time. We're just going to tell the story, and it just works, and it does make it great fun. It means it rolls along at a fantastic pace. In spite of being different in many ways to some of the more modern films, it also establishes quite a lot that we still see in the modern films. So actually that whole thing of, well, Bond can bet a woman inside a couple of lines, it kind of still happens. It's maybe a bit more subtle these days because it has to be, but yeah, it kind of still happens. And the whole sort of thing of going to exotic places and meeting sort of people in those exotic places that will help you out, and you don't know who to trust, etc., etc., etc. And some other things that it kind of establishes that I won't get into because they'll spoil several movies down the line. But there's quite a few tropes that come up here that you'll just see recurring throughout.
Yeah. I'd like I said, I think, like you say, it does treat film as if it's at a premium. Also, it's something, the film doesn't treat the audience like we're stupid. It kind of needs us to kind of be watching, pay attention, know everything, because it will just say something and it's not going to repeat it or dumb it down. It's very rare that there's too much exposition. There are some scenes where they're just talking and saying certain words that I didn't particularly understand. They were like, "We got to go to this reactor room where this is going to happen." I'm like, but what does that mean? But and you kind of have to go along with it. But that's not really a distraction. It's only kind of in the last third where you sort of don't really I didn't really catch what was really going on too much. But like, there's a lot of campy action as well, which I'm a fan of. I understand some people aren't, and that's why they prefer them in modern films. I love a good bit. I mean, look, we're classic Doctor Who fans. We're used to like the kind of weird fights, especially like the John Pertwee. This works for me. Seeing Bond hit somebody once and then be able just to throw them over like stairs. Seeing Bond just be able to like avoid tons of bullets at once. Yeah, I think you say we meet a really good cast of characters in this film. As well, and they're very fleshed out characters as well. Actually, it's pretty good. We also get some fun little gadgets. The cyanide cigarette was a particular favorite of mine. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, mate. I can't like it's getting one of those where I think we just go through everything. No, I'll reply with it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, even like some of the little tricks that Bond uses, like kind of taping the hair across the door and things like that, so that you can see if anybody's been in the room. While he's been out and stuff like that. It's just very clever little stuff, and it's the kind of thing that spies used to do back in the 1950s. They lay these little traps, they do these little things. So there's an element of realism to it, not necessarily in the scale of the story, because most spy work, let's face it, is not as kind of full on an action field as that. It's more observation and things like that. But some of the little tricks that he uses certainly are very authentic.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan again of making it look like there's somebody in the bed. So that's really cool. I'd say I know some people are going to probably go, oh, I'm not making fun of this because I loved it. I'm a big fan of when someone's driving and it's just a green screen. That shot, just that. I love shit like that. I think it's great, and like just the fact that he's bobbing along. You see Sean Connery moving his head around a little bit. I just think that's brilliant, and I wonder, especially at the time as well, what Sean would have been thinking. They're like, Sean, drive the car, mate. We'll make it look all right. Bob your head up and down. Because the green screen and that sort of compositing would have been relatively new then, to be honest. It would have died.
Yeah. I mean, they probably would have thought it looked quite flashy. And yeah, it does look a little bit ridiculous now. And I think things like the Naked Gun and Police Squad have kind of spoiled little tricks like that, because Police Squad, which was like the sitcom precursor to the Naked Gun, used to do things like, they'd be sitting in the police car driving along and the green screen behind them would have something like a fucking Roman chariot race going on behind them, or just ridiculous things. Or sort of people flying over the windscreen and stuff as they're just casually driving around. but yeah, it works, and I think you just have to take it as of its time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, there are probably a few things as we talk through this that you kind of have to go, well, actually, it's of its time.
Yeah,
Because there are one or two elements that are quite questionable in this.
absolutely. I think as well, it's just like I think the dialogue's really snappy. Like I think the thing is that Bond sometimes these days isn't as likable as he is in this film. Like, I'm a big fan of Daniel Craig's James Bond, but I wouldn't say I like the character of that. Whereas Sean Connery, I'm like, this is a sick, badass guy who can get the ladies. He's slick, he's cool, he's charming. You know, he's the dialogue was really good. The only thing that let me down was I loved the perception of Doctor No. Like this, we didn't really know who Doctor No was. We didn't really know what he looked like, and we didn't really know what his character was. But when we meet him in the final act, it did fall flat a little bit for me. Not just because of the issues with that character, but also I thought, oh, it was really cool actually when you didn't know who Doctor No was. And then when you meet him, it just kind of goes a bit like, oh.
Yeah, they build him up very well. So for example, you don't get introduced to him for quite a while. Like literally, you see his name in the first 5 minutes of the film because it's on the front of the file, but you don't get introduced to him for quite a while. And then you get the thing where Dent goes to the island and you hear this voice, and it's not even a kind of booming or sort of menacing voice. It's just this very calm voice, but with a degree of menace to it. And it just works very well. And yet, maybe it does fall a little flat when you actually get that reveal in the third act. I will accept that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Like I don't obviously I don't know what I was expecting, but it was just to me like the whole thing of I was testing you, Bond, to see if you would be good enough to join Spectre and all this sort of stuff. And then he was like, yeah, no, I don't actually fancy it. And then there's just a fight ensues. I'd be like, oh, you were building up this whole kind of confrontation. And there wasn't really one, and he just kind of scuppers away. And then we get a really cool sequence in like tunnels with water and stuff. That's really cool. I'm not going to shit on that. It's a wonderful sequence. It's brilliant. We get a campy, fun action sequence at the end. But actually, the main villain itself wasn't something that I went, oh yeah, I really can't wait to think of that. The guy this is named after, Dr. No, I was like, possibly one of the weaker parts of the film as a character of itself, as an actual plot device and as the build-up. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it is a situation where, generally speaking, in terms of villains across the 25 films, we are spoiled. We get some cracking villains, we get some cracking performances. They range from the kind of menacing to the very kind of over the top. And yeah, I mean, Doctor No isn't really the focus on this, which is weird because it's the name of the film. It's more the kind of introduction to Bond, if you like. It's odd. It's almost like Doctor No's a bit inconsequential in the film that's actually named after him. And I think a part of that is because you don't really see him in the third act. And you hear about these things that he's done. So you hear about the fisherman that went over and didn't come back, and you hear about Honey's father being killed and things like that. But you don't actually see any of that. You kind of see elements of like the fear that he puts into people. So the guy biting into the cigarette and the woman who's going to stab herself and stuff like that. But yeah, you don't really kind of see him being villainous.
No, yeah, I think that's what it is. And like you said, I think over again, I don't know many of them, but I do know for a fact that some of the James Bond villains are iconic. And yeah, I think this is a really good starting point. I think it is, like I said, when I came out watching that film, I had a really good time with that. I had a lot of fun. And I don't know, I didn't go in with any expectations. I didn't look at the star score. I didn't know what the perception of this film was. I obviously knew it must have done well at the box office because they did a sequel, but I didn't actually know what the public perception of the film was. So when I came in, I had no expectations. And I came out going, yeah, I had a really solid time with that.
It's one that's had a bit of a reevaluation. So I think on release it wasn't necessarily received that well. It did well at the box office, but critically it wasn't received that well. But I think retrospectively, people now look at it as one of the better films. For me personally, I think that it's probably in the mid-range of the Connerys. There's better stuff to come, but it is a lot slick. It's probably one of the most slick Bond films in terms of pacing. It doesn't meander; it just rolls along.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say as well, it's really good with its action. Like it's very sparse with its action. It's not just like bang, bang, bang. Like there is a lot of times you get some character moments, normally quite campy and silly, but overall some good like some fun stuff. Like you say, there was some really dark undertones. So there's obviously that photographer that was like willing to like stab herself and stuff like that. You get some really dark undertones, and again, that's really good in the build up to Doctor No as a character, because you're like, how can one person make somebody be scared so much just to mention who they are or even their name? Who is enlisting that fear in them? And then when you meet them, you're a bit like, oh,
yeah. And I mean, even sort of not related to Doctor No, you get the scene where Honey tells Bond about her being raped by her landlord.
Yeah.
And the fact she put a black widow in his bedroom, and it took him a week to die and stuff like that. And it's like, there's some proper dark stuff in there. And it's largely dark because of that's quite dark in the books, Yeah, I mean it's quite brutal in points and quite serious, which is something that the series doesn't always do. It kind of fades in and out of that. So, there are times when you don't get that serious aspect to Bond with certain actors, and there's others where they overplay it to a degree. But I think this probably how it gets the balance right.
Absolutely, because I think you still come out of the film with, like I said, that fun kind of. I had a really good time with this. It was an hour and it's an hour and 50 minutes. It feels like an hour and a half, to be honest. It does a really good job at just having a good time. But yeah, it handles that stuff right. It doesn't feel out of place. It feels earned. You sort of at that point care about the characters enough to feel connected to them.
And some of the production where you might suspect there would be issues, it kind of glosses over a little bit, so the fact that Ursula Andress was dubbed, or was dubbed twice over, you don't really kind of notice it, because they had one actress dubbed for the speaking voice and they had another actress dubbed for the singing voice. You don't really kind of notice it too well. No. You just kind of take it in its stride, because you're being so kind of taken away on this journey that you don't even have time to kind of think about stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so kind of, the journey's all enticing, and like I said, it's not a simple story. You have to keep double guessing characters. You don't really know where you're going. Bond doesn't really know where he's going at any point. He's gone to Jamaica, but he knows kind of the location, but he doesn't really know what he's doing there. Doesn't really know who's behind it. Doesn't really know who he can trust.
Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant. The whole setup is he doesn't know what's happened. Basically the whole reason for him being there, the whole setup is just, we can't contact our agent. We've lost Jamaica. We've not been able to contact our agent. Go and find out what's happened.
Yeah,
obviously absolutely. We know as an audience, but Bond doesn't. So he's kind of going in completely blind, so to speak.
And that allows the kind of, like you say, although we do get a few more tidbits, perhaps then Bond, we still, because we are following Bond and this is Bond's movie, we still don't really know much more than he does. And that's really fun because, like I said, especially on the first watch, I'm sat there going, well, who can I trust? Who can I not? Even though he's had sex with her, is she good and is she not? What does Bond, you're also questioning as well, what does Bond know? When Bond walks into a room, does he actually know more than he's letting on?
Yeah.
How intelligent is this character? So when you see those moments and you get those payoffs, it's really cool. And I think I have to give a massive shout out to Connery as well, because like I said, I've not seen any of his Bond films. I know he's an iconic Bond, he's obviously the very first, but legitimately that is a great performance throughout. He does the serious very well. You can tell as well he does have a connection to Honey. So it's
I mean, it's and something else that comes across again across the comedy Bond, and it comes across here. He is hard.
yeah.
He is one hard bastard. You know that he's not. There's not many people that are going to best him in a fight.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a guy that's got the bollocks to lie in bed with a fucking tarantula for 2 minutes until he can squish it with a shoe.
Like you said though, that scene, you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier on your breakdown, when you were like, it feels like it lasts 5 minutes, but it's actually possibly about 45 seconds to a minute. I was sat there going,
and that's all about the music and the sound effects.
Yeah,
it's all about and like the fact you can literally see the sweat on Bond, but it's all about like the music and the sound effects bringing up the tension, and it's like, wow, I'm like you. I'm like the spiders. I'm like,
yeah.
But I was. I mean, I've seen it before, obviously, but I was sat there eating me tea while it was on last night, and I'm like, and yeah, it feels like it lasts about 5 minutes because it's just it's the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, absolutely. And Connery, even though it only cuts him a few times, his face with the sweat pouring, it's one of the rare times when we see Bond kind of scared. We rarely, even in films where he's like up against human beings who could literally kill him at the summer finger. It's one of the only scenes where I've ever seen Bond scared.
So obviously, this is the first time you've seen it. Did you guess what was in the box when Dent took the box?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because that's the great, it's something bad because even as Dent's walking away, he's literally holding it at an arm's length, isn't he? He's like,
yeah. Again, every aspect of this film seems to have an attention to detail to it. Is sensational. Another thing as well is I'm really happy about this. Is there are elements to it, but I'm happy that Bond isn't invincible. Like he doesn't do anything. Yeah, at this point, absolutely batshit and gets away with it. Like this film is very much kind of like, it's very clear if he gets shot, he's going down. Sort of thing. Like he doesn't take this. I think that's the issue with many action films. You say whether it be Mission Impossible, the Mondays one, with James Bond, or whoever can take so many bullets and damage and get away with it, and you kind of just sit there and go, huh?
Yeah.
Whereas in this film, it's very clear that is not the case.
Yeah, it's steeped in realism. You see him get hurt. So, for example, the section in the pipe where he has to rip his shirt off to cover his hands in the pipe because of the heat that's coming through the pipe. He's not invulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant stuff. Like I said, I don't really. It's weird that normally it's rare on a podcast that I don't have a massive issue with this film. They say there are issues with it, but most of them are of its time and stuff we could get into, but it's semantics and stuff that we go, you wouldn't see that today. And we could complain about it, but at the end of the day, for me, like we can't really add anything to it other than you wouldn't see that today. That's not that's not really correct to do.
And it's I mean, what you'd also note is that most of the Jamaican characters that Bond meets are good guys. They're his allies. They help him. Like his two, with the exception of Leiter, his two biggest allies in this film are Jamaican guys.
Yeah.
That don't have an affiliation or anything. They're just there to help him because they believe in what's right. And I mean, when you look at what happens to Quarrel, it's awful. It's horrible. Genuinely, you feel sick.
I had to look away. I had to look away, even at the thought of it.
It's like, this guy's sacrificed himself to for somebody that he's just met.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I said, that's the weird thing about this film, is that everything has its time, everything is paced to perfection, everything is sort of written really well. Like you say, this film actually is a really good start for it. Actually, this film, I'm happy that I've come away from this film quite positive and ready to kind of go into the next month, not watched it and gone, oh no.
I had a feeling that you would.
What, be positive or negative?
Yeah, I had a feeling that you would, because it's just a very well made film.
Yeah. I've overall, like I said, this podcast might be shorter again, guys, because I don't have anything really negative to add or much more to say than what we already have. And there's no point wasting time talking for an extra half an hour, just going over things over and over again. Obviously, normally, if it's like Time Flight, we can get into a debate and discuss things. But really, for me, mate, I just had a good time. Like, at the end of the day, I just watched it and I went, yeah, that's cool. Some really nice moments in there. Obviously, so there are some things you look at now and you sort of cringe at and you go, oh. But then you have to go to the thing of, it was the 60s. It doesn't make it right. I'm not saying it makes it right. But would they have done that today? No.
Yeah, I mean, there are elements to it where it's like, okay,
this is where we'd.
But in the same way as there are certain Doctor Who stories where you get into that and it's like, you just gotta kind of. I always kind of take the view that you can't judge something from 60 years ago with today's moral standards.
Yeah.
Just as we wouldn't want media that is produced today to be judged by the moral standards of 50 years' time.
Exactly.
People would be appalled by a lot of it. So you acknowledge it, you acknowledge that there are issues, you thank fuck that we've moved on and are more progressive now in some ways.
Absolutely.
And it should never get in the way of it being a good piece of film or a good piece of media, because it was never the intention at the time to offend.
Nope.
It's just the way things work.
Yep. Exactly. And on that note, I think it is time for scores on the doors. I'm going to be generous. I'm feeling happy though. I'm going to give it an 8. I had a very solid time with this film. Obviously for me, it could have got a 9 just by being consistently quite good. It never bored me, right? If I was bored at any point, I would probably dropped it, but I was always entertained. It's just for me, the actual character of Dr. No just did nothing for me. And actually I ended up at the end of it just going, all right, cool. Okay. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll go 7.5.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly fair. Like I said, guys, this is going to be a new series every month. It's not going to be me and John. I think ever again. I think there's going to be always 3 of us from now on. I think this is the only one where literally.
Yes, we are scheduled to have somebody on for every one of the next 24 films. Obviously, people might drop out of the schedule, but we'll wing in a reserve or whatever. But we just felt that for the first one, it was important to have it as just us two, so that we could introduce the series, talk a little bit about our own kind of relationships with the series and where we are with it. And obviously, as we get guest contributors come in, we'll then be able to talk to them about their experiences of the films.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next, I think whenever we do the next one, which will be sometime next month, it is scheduled to be From Russia with Love, and we are scheduled to be joined by Mr. Adam Mamoon, friend of the show.
Yes, friend of the show. Like John said, though, and teased, there are going to be some new people, some new faces throughout the series. I think you meet one of them quite early on. I think one of them is kind of in the mid-pack. So
we do meet somebody new quite early on.
Yes. So, but you will see some old faces and new faces. But yes, absolutely. And of course, none of the contents is appearing. And that's exactly why it's penciled in my head. I did speak to you about this the other day. Next week should be Vincent the Doctor. So we'll return to our Doctor Who monthly reviews. That's also going to be another really positive one now.
It's
So,
likely to be another short one, isn't it? Because it's just going to
yeah.
be me, you, and Harry going, oh, I bloody love Vincent and the Doctor.
It's bloody good, isn't it? Yeah. So that's going to be another short one. Absolutely. But you can follow John on Twitter at johnboy_cook. For my favorite Twitter account on Twitter, that isn't West Ham Clips. And you can follow me on Twitter at the Timeless Pod or at @AlexKing_Dom. Or you can follow my Instagram if you want to, at Alex_King_Dom. So yes, next week, Vincent the Doctor. And yes, we'll see you guys all soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
It does give me a little minute as we're going quite quickly. It does give me a little minute to mention that I met Russell T Davies on Saturday.
You did.
I did. I met Russell T Davies on Saturday.
There's a lovely photo.
Very, very, very very, very nice man.
So
anyway, yeah, I thought I'd just leave you all jealous.
There you go. Are you going to say a regular thing, or are you just going to end it on that bombshell this week?
No, you're right. Good night. God bless. Don't have nightmares. Do sleep well. Underneath the mango tree, my honey and me, with my brother moon.